Our intro music is provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com.
Night Dreams Scary Story Night on Friday nights. Call in at 9:30 p.m. Pacific at 1-253-203-6695.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on Night Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Well, thank you, John. This is Gary down at the, down at the compound, down at the harbor. And on the news today, well, some scientists are now claiming a black hole could appear next to Earth at any time. What would happen? Well, of course, we're going to get sucked into it. Who knows what happens after that? Well, Antarctica just seems to be melting more and more. I don't know what we can do about that. I think it's gone to the past, the tipping point. And on the news also, I hate to say it, Google and MasterCard made a secret deal. Now they're tracking everything you buy, not just online. Every time you use that card, even in a retail store, they're tracking what you're buying. Ooh, that's kind of scary. Hey, tonight we're going to be talking with Shawn Graham. We're going to be talking about scary movies, scary stories, scary everything, dogmen, you name it. Good time to happen because starting in September on Fridays, we're going to have, a scary story night between 9:30 and 10. The last half an hour of the show, you can call up, tell a scary story, and whoever has the scariest story that night wins a gift. Then at the end of September, somebody's going to win a real nice recorder. So you can go out and get some nice, conversations with ghosts or whatever. Hey, Shawn Graham, how you doing tonight? And welcome to Night Dreams Talk Radio.
Well, thanks for having me on Night Dreams Talk Radio, Gary. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Oh, yeah. Well, I hear you got some real scary stories.
Well, yeah. Well, the first thing I want to tell you about is, about my personal, how I got to you. It was from my friend Dark Waters. He invited me to start a podcast on his Dark Waters radio channel. My podcast is Chasing the Truth with Shawn Graham, from the normal to the paranormal, but it's not exactly why I'm there. One of the reasons that Dark Waters really touched base with me was my ability to tell scary stories. And that was the big thing that really caught his attention. And then about 3 or 4 months ago, probably longer than that, he came to me and said, "Hey, you want to start a podcast?" And I was like, I wasn't really thinking about doing a podcast, but sure, why not? Biggest thing I could do right now is stub my toe doing that, so why not? So here I am.
Oh, yeah. And,
ready to go.
In Dark Waters, has been on my show a few times, and he's had some really, interesting, scary stories and unique ones. So let's see if you can top his.
Well, I want to tell you a little bit of origin of where I found my ability to tell ghost stories. One was from my grandmother. She just absolutely loved telling her grandkids scary stories. When I was a little kid, she'd get us up in a little group and tell us ghost stories. And as she's telling us ghost stories, and we're so engrossed into the ghost stories that she would start turning lights off. We wouldn't notice it or anything. By the end of the ghost story, we're scared crazy, half to death. And there's only 2 lights in the whole house, one in the kitchen, one in the back bedroom somewhere. And she says, "Okay, kids, go off." And I can probably regale you a couple of those stories, no problem. The other is jacktails. I don't know if you've ever heard of a jacktail.
No, I have not.
Okay. Well, actually, you have. Jack jumped over the candlestick. Jack and Jill went up the hill. Jack and the Beanstalk, Jack Frost, all those are types of jacktails. The hero kind of part of the jacktails is Jack. He's usually portrayed as a young man or a young boy. And he usually wins and becomes a hero of the story from just the seat of his pants or just plain dumb luck. So, but there's a whole big festival and everything in Northeast Tennessee over in Jonesboro that's just a jacktail festival. And usually like 10,000 people or something will show up. And I got interested in this when I was a little kid from a school teacher by the name of Miss Worley, and she used to tell Jack tales ever so often, and that's how I got involved. I can tell you like a really simple paranormal kind of Jack tale to start off to kind of give you a taste of where I'm coming from. I'm not going to tell Jack tales all night. Just this one, if you want to hear that one.
Oh, why not? I mean, we got 2 hours.
Sure. Okay. Well, the first one, this one is called Sup, Doll Sup. Interesting name, right?
That's different.
So, yeah, it's different. Well, anyway, story goes is Jack is a little old fella, and he just now, started to live on his own, and he was hard on his luck. So one day he woke up and he couldn't find any food anywhere, and his belly was telling him, hey, buddy, you need to get some food. So he decided, well, I'm going to have to find some work, and that I'm not too keen on work, but I'm not too keen on being hungry either. So he walks toward town, puts his hat on his head, and he starts walking toward town. He comes up on this old mill. This old mill, there was in front of the old mill was this miller that owned the mill. He's whittling away, and he walked up to the miller, and he said, sir, hey, do you have a job or a little bit of work you can throw my way? I'm a little bit down on my luck. And the miller looked him up and down, and he said, well, maybe. Can you mill some corn? He said, yeah, I think I can. And he said, well, I got to warn you. He said, this old mill is haunted. He said, there ain't been nobody that can stay the night and wake up alive the next day. And old Jack looked at him real queer-like, and Miller said, well, I'll give you a chance. And he handed him the keys to the mill, and he showed him around a little bit, and he said, I'll be back a little bit later. Jack said, okay, I'll see you later. He started rifling around and looking around the mill, and a few minutes later, an old man started walking down the road toward him. And he saw him. He stood at the door of the mill, old Jack did. And the old man was carrying a big old sack of corn and walks up to him. He said, hey, old Jack, can you grind up and mill this corn for me? And he said, well, yes, sir, I can. But, man, how did you know my name? He said, well, I recognized you just as soon as I seen you. Well, old Jack said, well, sir, I'll go ahead and grind it up. He grabbed that sack of corn. He went back and went in to grind them and mill up the corn, and then he started to put it back in the sack as he was milling it. He went back to the old man and said, here's your sack of cornmeal. And the old man said, well, fantastic. You've done such a good job, I'm going to give you a gift. So he reached in his pocket and pulled out this old silver knife and hands it to him. He said, now, old Jack, this thing is so sharp it'll cut through anything. And I really appreciate you grinding this old corn up for me. Jack said, well, I appreciate you. And the old man turned around, and he went off in the same direction he come. And Jack was looking at that pretty old knife, and he was about ready to pick up a stick to start whittling with it, see how sharp it was. And then he noticed the miller was coming back, and he had a big old hunk of meat in one hand and a corn pone in the next. And I don't know if you know what a corn pone is. It's cornbread.
Right.
So he walks up to Jack, and he says, here's you some meat and a corn pone, Jack. So this is a right fitting last meal for you. And Jack looked at him kind of queer-like, and he said, all right. He said, I don't know about that last meal bit, but I'll sure take this meat and this hunk of cornbread. And Miller said, well, I'll come back in the morning and check on things and see what's a-happening. And Jackson said, all right, good night, sir. And off the old miller went back toward his house. And Jack went back in. It was getting right dark like at the time. And he started building a fire. And he whipped out that silver knife, and he started to cutting the meat up and chopping it up. And he was about ready to make a stew, and he threw it in the pot and was stirring around. His belly was growling like a tiger. So next thing he noticed was this big old black cat walking through the door. Comes in. It was the biggest black cat he'd seen in these parts in all his life, at least. So the cat walks in, sits right next to him, pretty close to the pot of stewed meat. Jack looked down and didn't really pay any attention to it. And a minute or two later, here comes another black cat. Comes right in from the blackness of the night, sits next to that other cat. Then another one, and another one. And shortly after a while, 11 more joined that big old black cat. And it startled old Jack when he recognized that there was 12 black cats surrounding him. And he thought, well, there ain't no old cats going to get a hold of me. I've got a sharp knife right here. I'll take care of them if they try to do anything. Well, a few minutes later, after he was stirring the old black kettle and getting the stewed meat just right to eat, the biggest black cat out of the bunch walks up to that kettle of stewed meat, rears back and says, "Sup, doll, sup." Sticks its old doll in. The doll is a paw on the cat. Just so you know, that's where the more or the story tale comes from. Sticks its old doll in, pulls it out, and it licks all the meat and the stew off its paw and its doll. And then old Jack looks at her real hateful like and said, "If you do that again, I'm going to cut that old doll off of you, and you'll never be able to do that again." And the cat looked at him and then looked at the stewed meat and reared back and said, "Sup, doll, sup." Old Jack said, "I told you I was going to do this." He whipped out that silver knife and lapped that paw off of that cat, and it fell to the floor. That cat reared back and screamed and caterwauled, and all sorts of hellacious sounds come out of the rest of the cats, and they stirred around, and off they trucked out into the night. And old Jack was chasing them out and closed the door behind him and made sure that all the cats were out of that mill. And then he walked back to look at that old paw he done cut off that cat. Well, he got to where the paw was, but there wasn't no paw. It was a lady's hand. The lady's hand had a pretty gold ring on it. He said, "Well, that don't make no sense." So he said, he went and grabbed old cloth and he wrapped it up and put that lady's hand away. He was going to ask the old miller about it in the morning. He put that hand up and started eating his supper, and he got right full and satisfied, and he started nodding off, and then he snored the night away. Well, the next morning, true to his word, the miller come in bright and early. He walked in, not expecting to see anything moving. Walked in, he found old Jack laying there snoring away. He woke up. Jack said, "What happened in here? There's some blood all over the place." "Well, I've been meaning to tell you something about that." So he grabbed a hold of that wrapped up hand and told him the story of what happened the night before. And old Miller looked at that hand. He said, I recognize that hand, and I really do know where that ring come from." And Jack was just looking at him. He said, "Come on along with me, Jack." So Jack follows old Miller up to his house, and he goes in through the front door and up the stairs and finds his wife in bed asleep. His wife's got the covers up to her neck. Covered up. Yeah, and the old Miller said, "Wife, I need to see your hand." And the wife pulled out her right hand, just showed it off, and said, "No, not that hand, your other hand." Well, she wouldn't pull the hand out at all. So the old Miller got right testy with her and grabbed a hold of all the covers and pulled it off the bed. And all you could see where that left hand should have been was a bloody stub.
Oh, wow.
And, of course, all of a sudden, 11 women burst into the bedroom with Jack and the miller and the miller's wife. And they are all talking and murmuring like they've been called in a lie, how witches do. And old Miller said, "I knew you were a witch. I knew you were a witch." And he grabs a hold of the collar of Jack's collar, pulls